Welcome to the Epic Bible Stories channel. Within the vast expanse of the Bible, few passages are as concise, yet as profoundly unsettling as those that speak of the Nephilim. These colossal beings, these giants, are said by ancient traditions to have once roamed alongside humanity, influencing the very course of civilization long before the cataclysmic flood. Most individuals tend to read these brief mentions, move on, and quickly forget. However, for those who truly scrutinize, for those who dare to pose the challenging questions, something far more significant emerges, something that typically remains unaddressed in standard Sunday sermons. One of these infrequently asked questions, and arguably one of the most disquieting, is this: if male giants truly existed, then did female giants, often referred to as giantesses, also exist? Where's the concrete evidence for these so-called giantesses? Why are they not prominently featured in official historical records, or even in the most daring conjectures put forth by conventional archaeology? In this particular episode, we will embark on a journey, guiding you through forgotten historical pathways, exploring forbidden texts, and examining overlooked evidence, all in an effort to uncover whether these towering women genuinely walked the earth. And if they did, their presence could fundamentally alter our current understanding of the role these extraordinary entities played in the earliest stages of human civilization, preceding the Great Flood. This subject stands as one of the most extensively debated and speculated topics within the realms of biblical and historical discourse, drawing in a substantial number of curious individuals and dedicated scholars alike. The very concept of the ancient Nephilim evokes an equal measure of fascination and perplexity, prompting many to seek a deeper comprehension of the circumstances surrounding the emergence of these enigmatic beings. What is commonly understood, based on biblical accounts, is that the Nephilim were a distinct race of giants who came into existence through the union of the sons of God, often identified as fallen angels, known as the Watchers, and human women. This narrative is explicitly detailed in Genesis 6, and further alluded to in passages from the book of Jude, which also make reference to these beings. This specific point generates a broad spectrum of inquiries, and among them, a debate that has garnered immense interest in recent decades comes to the forefront. Did the giantesses truly exist? Were there, in antiquity, colossal women coexisting with their enormous male counterparts? This question gains even greater relevance because in the majority of instances, both within the Bible and in other apocryphal texts, the figure of the giant is almost exclusively depicted as male. Furthermore, when the mythologies of ancient peoples address beings of such extraordinary stature across numerous cultures, the emphasis almost invariably falls on male giants, with little to no mention of female figures sharing these imposing characteristics. Consequently, the mystery and uncertainty surrounding the existence of giantesses, or giant women, persist to this very day, making it one of the most compelling enigmas that captivates both biblical scholars and enthusiasts of ancient mythologies. This conspicuous silence concerning giantesses in scriptures and mythologies introduces an additional layer of complexity to our understanding of the Nephilim. Many ponder whether this lack of mention genuinely signifies that these female figures never existed, or if, perhaps, the ancient narratives intentionally omitted their presence due to specific cultural or symbolic considerations. For some, the absence of explicit accounts might simply reflect a narrative focus centered on the masculine, with giants being described as men as an integral part of a broader symbolic and mythological framework. However, for others, this very absence suggests something far more profound, potentially even indicating that giantesses were, in fact, not a part of this ancient equation. Beyond merely creating confusion, this issue also ignites intense curiosity among readers of Scripture, students of theology, and anyone endeavoring to unravel the profound mysteries embedded within the Bible. Over the centuries, these persistent questions regarding the nature of the Nephilim and the potential existence of their female counterparts have fueled a vast array of interpretations. Some of these are more conservative in their approach, while others are decidedly more audacious. Yet all strive to offer a plausible explanation for what genuinely transpired during that distant epoch of human history. Given the inherent complexity of this subject, there are currently no definitive answers or pieces of information that can conclusively prove either the existence or non-existence of giantesses. What we do have are various hypotheses and theories that, drawing upon ancient narratives and theological speculations, endeavor to illuminate these enigmatic beings. One of the approaches frequently discussed concerning giantesses is intrinsically linked to the concept that the giants, or Nephilim, were hybrid beings, the direct result of a union between the Watchers, fallen angels, and human women. In such a scenario, the existence of giantesses would theoretically be a plausible possibility. But how might they have been conceived? And what specific role or function would they have played within the mythology and historical accounts of these colossal beings? The debate remains ongoing, and to delve deeper into these intricate questions, it's essential to consider the diverse perspectives and interpretations that emerge around the figure of the giantesses. One of the most widely accepted ideas is that the giants, according to certain interpretations of biblical texts, were not simply human beings, but rather hybrid creatures, the product of crossbreeding between different species. This genetic combination supposedly resulted in their extraordinary stature and unique physical characteristics. Within this framework, the Nephilim would be regarded as beings of exceptional longevity, possessing a lifespan far exceeding that of ordinary human beings of that era, which typically range between 500 and 900 years. An emblematic example of this extended lifespan is the figure of Methuselah, who is said to have lived to the astonishing age of 969 years, and Noah, who reportedly reached 950 years. Figures whose very existences defied the normal limitations of human life. Based on this concept of extended longevity, scholars who support this particular idea argue that the giants were creatures of a more intricate nature, possessing a biological constitution that would enable them to live for significantly longer periods. This would imply, according to this interpretation, that the Nephilim could potentially live up to 3 times the life expectancy of common humans of that time. However, this remarkable longevity might have come at a cost. These creatures could have become progressively more sterile as time passed. For this reason, they would eventually lose the ability to procreate, thereby precluding the emergence of a subsequent generation for these colossal beings. Thus, the Nephilim would be considered hybrids, incapable of reproduction. When viewed through this lens, a line of reasoning emerges suggesting that, being sterile, these giants could not have generated descendants since they would lack the inherent ability to reproduce among themselves. In this specific scenario, the concept of giantesses would lose its meaning, as reproduction among the male giants would be biologically impossible, rendering female giants unnecessary for the perpetuation of their species or the Nephilim lineage. This point marks one of the most significant divergences in the discussions surrounding this topic. If the giants were indeed hybrids and sterile, would the existence of giantesses be a biological impossibility, or simply a narrative omission within the ancient stories? These questions continue to be rigorously debated in various academic circles, yet a definitive consensus remains elusive. The second perspective on giants in antiquity, which actively entertains the possibility of giantesses, offers a distinct approach and directly challenges the notion that only male giants existed. According to this line of thought, it is entirely plausible that alongside the male giants, there were also women of comparable stature, and that these giantesses served as female partners for these colossal creatures. This argument is rooted in a straightforward logical premise. If giants truly existed, with sizes varying from approximately 3 meters, around 9.9 feet, to 5 meters, about 16 feet, it would be implausible for them to consistently engage in procreation with women of average height, such as those described in ancient societies. The substantial size discrepancy between the giants and average women would, from a purely physical perspective, present a significant challenge to successful union. This leads to the conclusion that giants would necessitate female partners of a similar impressive size for reproduction to be both viable and natural. This theory gains further strength when we consider the role of women in ancient societies, as depicted in historical and biblical narratives. In biblical tradition, female figures were often not prominently highlighted in genealogies or in the primary narratives, a phenomenon that can be readily explained by the patriarchal context prevalent in ancient Semitic cultures. According to this viewpoint, biblical genealogies focus primarily on men, or more precisely, on male descendants, as they were the ones who carried the family name and inherited the lineages. In this cultural context, women, despite often playing crucial roles in society, were frequently sidelined, or when mentioned, their presence was treated as secondary. This pronounced emphasis on male figures was not confined solely to genealogies, but was also reflected in historical and mythological narratives, which frequently underscored the feats and accomplishments of men. Meanwhile, women, though undeniably essential, were often relegated to the periphery of grand narratives. Therefore, when interpreting biblical passages that speak of giants, many scholars contend that the absence of direct references to giantesses could be attributed precisely to this pervasive patriarchal structure, which profoundly influenced the scriptures themselves. Consequently, the lack of explicit mention of the female partners of giants would not necessarily indicate their non-existence, but rather a limitation inherent in ancient narratives, which prioritized male aspects. According to this view, the idea that giants had female partners can be seen not only as a biological and logical possibility, but also as a result of a lack of attention to details that were considered secondary in a context where female figures rarely receive the same emphasis as men in genealogies and sacred stories. Furthermore, by considering that giantesses could indeed have existed, this theory offers a more comprehensive explanation for the process of the generation and perpetuation of the Nephilim race. It suggests that the gigantic male creatures were not the outcome of isolated unions, but rather part of a reproductive system that involved both male and female figures whose lineages were equally important, even if they remain unrecorded in the explicit accounts. To bolster this theory, some scholars and enthusiasts of ancient history also highlight compelling similarities with mythologies from other cultures, where giants and beings of great stature were often depicted accompanied by equally imposing female figures. In Greek mythology, for instance, the giants known as the Titans frequently had powerful partners and wives. Similarly, in Norse and other cultural traditions, the presence of women with extraordinary characteristics was not uncommon. These cross-cultural comparisons suggest that the existence of giantesses would not be an isolated or unique idea, but rather an integral component of a global collective imagination that encompassed both male and female figures and myths of extraordinary beings. The notion that giantesses were deliberately omitted from the scriptures and biblical narratives can therefore be understood as a direct consequence of the power structure and narrative focus prevalent at the time, which was primarily centered on men and male lineages. In this scenario, women, including giantesses, would have been viewed as secondary figures, not deemed significant enough to be recorded with the same level of detail as men. This perspective can also be interpreted as an attempt to preserve the patriarchal dominance of lineages, where descent and the family name were exclusively passed down from father to son, and female figures were largely relegated to the shadow of this established structure. Ultimately, this theory provides a compelling explanation for the absence of records concerning giantesses and reinforces the idea that although they may not have been explicitly mentioned, this does not equate to a denial of their existence, or that they played no active role in the history of the giants. For proponents of this view, giantesses would indeed have been essential partners in the perpetuation of the Nephilim race, and their omission in the scriptures reflects more of a cultural and narrative choice than irrefutable proof of their non-existence. A third perspective on giants in antiquity suggests that these beings were simply sterile, a concept that aligns with the first view discussed, but with additional nuances that warrant deeper analysis. According to this theory, giants, much like other creatures of hybrid lineages, could have lived extraordinarily long lives, potentially up to 3 times the life expectancy of a common human of the era. As previously mentioned, in several biblical periods, humans exhibited impressive longevity, with figures like Methuselah, Noah, and Adam living for over 900 years. From this perspective, the giants, being descendants of fallen angels and human women, could have possessed even longer lifespans due to their hybrid nature and their inherent connection to celestial entities. The primary argument of this viewpoint is that with such exceptionally long lives, giants would not necessarily require descendants to continue existing or to perpetuate their lineage. This could explain the absence of mentions of giantesses or female partners of the giants, as, unlike common humans, these beings would not need to reproduce to survive for extended periods or to ensure their continued existence after potential defeats or even death. In this context, the giants would be perceived as immortal or exceptionally long-lived beings who, even without generating direct descendants, could continue to inhabit the world for thousands of years. Furthermore, it's crucial to acknowledge that giants reappear in the scriptures after the flood, which raises intriguing questions about their origins and continuity. Several scholars interpret the reappearance of giants as a mysterious phenomenon, given that after the flood, the waters were supposed to have eradicated all of humanity except for Noah and his family. The most prevalent hypothesis among those who support this theory is that the fallen angels, known as the Watchers, returned to Earth after the flood to interact once again with human women, thereby generating a new generation of giants. This possibility of a second race of Nephilim is supported by some interpretations of the scriptures, which suggest that despite divine punishment, the fallen angels continued their interactions with humanity even after the flood event. However, even with this return, the giants began a gradual decline after the flood. Although many of them remained powerful and formidable, their presence in the world became increasingly rare, particularly as battles and wars against them intensified. A notable example of this can be found in Genesis 14, which recounts an ancient war between several kings and 3 distinct races of giants. According to the biblical account, 5 kings united their forces to confront the giants and ultimately defeated them. This event is emblematic because it illustrates not only the downfall of the giants, but also their inherent vulnerability when faced with human opponents. This gradual decline of giants over time can also be observed in other biblical accounts, such as the famous story of David and Goliath. While this is one of the most well-known examples of a battle between a human and a giant, it reflects a broader trend of giants being systematically defeated in battles against human armies. The story of Goliath, one of the most iconic narratives concerning the presence of giants in the scriptures, is particularly compelling. Goliath, described as a giant standing over 3 meters tall, represents the last prominent example of a giant warrior in direct confrontation with the Israelites. His defeat at the hands of David is not merely a personal victory for the young shepherd, but symbolizes the ultimate defeat of a race that, despite its power, was progressively being eliminated from history through successive confrontations. Goliath, as a part of this giant lineage, stands as a clear illustration of the fall of a being who, though feared and revered in his time, was no longer unbeatable or untouchable. Although the presence of giants diminished over time, it is essential to emphasize that in many ancient cultures, these beings continued to be recognized as imposing figures, in some cases, even revered as gods or divine descendants. The mythological narratives about giants, while varying widely from culture to culture, often portray them as beings endowed with extraordinary abilities. These giants were capable of performing heroic or even divine feats, often viewed as agents of fate, playing central roles in stories that profoundly shaped civilizations. This reverence reflects not only the collective imagination concerning their immense grandeur, but also a widespread perception of power that, for the societies of that time, seemed to transcend human comprehension. In many of these cultures, giants were not solely figures of fear, but also subjects of profound respect. The interactions between humans and giants, when depicted, were often imbued with an atmosphere of reverent awe, as if these beings inhabited a realm beyond ordinary human understanding. In Greek myths, for example, the Titanomachy, a series of cataclysmic battles between gods and titans, vividly showcases the struggle of one divine generation against their giant predecessors, providing a clear illustration of the complex relationship between the human and the supernatural. In the biblical tradition, as seen in the passages describing the giants as the offspring of the sons of God and daughters of men, this connection between humans and extraordinary beings is filled with ambiguity, a complex mixture of power, danger, and transcendence. However, over time, the presence of giants in historical narratives significantly diminished. Nevertheless, their extinction did not occur abruptly, but rather gradually, reflecting the decline of an era where these beings seemed to dominate the collective imagination. The successive defeats of the giants and the weakening of the lineages that, according to some traditions, comprise these imposing creatures mark the end of a cycle. This decline serves as a powerful metaphor for the advancement of human civilizations, which, over the centuries, began to gain more ground. While the giants, once symbols of absolute power, were eventually relegated to oblivion or transformed into mere mythological elements. This scenario of decline does not, however, imply that giants were invincible. Although the stories involving them, such as those described in the Bible, include notable victories like David's fight against Goliath, they also underscore the inherent fragility and vulnerability of these creatures. Giants, no matter how powerful, were not unbeatable. In fact, many scholars interpret these confrontations not only as physical battles, but also as symbolic representations of the forces of good triumphing over the forces of evil. The fall of the giants, as well as the rise of human heroes, reflects the ultimate triumph of human virtues, especially faith and courage, in the face of overwhelming adversity. This rich historical and cultural context opens the door for profound reflection on the various interpretations regarding the giants in antiquity and their interactions with women. Some legends speak of giants who, at a certain point, are said to have united with human women, resulting in hybrid descendants. However, the concept of giantesses, or female giants, remains a highly controversial and largely underexplored theme in ancient sources. Many texts, including biblical ones, focus almost exclusively on male giants, with little to no significant mention of female figures within that lineage. The conspicuous absence of these female figures in the narratives may be viewed as a cultural omission, directly reflecting the pervasive patriarchy in ancient societies that frequently silence the female presence, particularly in epic and mythological tales. However, it is crucial to pose the question, does the absence of giantesses in ancient texts truly imply that they never existed? Or does this notable gap reflect more of a cultural bias prevalent at the time than an accurate historical reality? The truth is that, without direct and irrefutable evidence, we cannot definitively claim that giantesses did not exist. To arrive at more profound conclusions about this intriguing topic, a more comprehensive study would be essential. This would involve not only a meticulous textual analysis of the scriptures, but also a deep reflection on the cultural, social, and historical influences that shape these ancient narratives. The questions surrounding the existence of giantesses, as well as the possibility of a society of giants composed of both sexes, continue to be vigorously debated among scholars, theologians, and enthusiastic students of ancient cultures. Some suggest that the relationship between giants and humans may have been far more complex than simple direct antagonism, and there could have been intricate interactions between these beings and human societies, possibly even leading to mixed lineages. Other theories lean towards the idea that giants could have been hybrids, the result of a union between divine beings and humans, a compelling proposal found in various mythologies and actively explored by scholars from diverse fields. Now, we are incredibly eager to hear your opinion on this truly fascinating subject. What are your thoughts about the compelling stories of the giants? Do you believe in the intriguing possibility that giantesses truly existed? Or perhaps the idea that giants and giantesses formed their own distinct families and societies? Or maybe you wholeheartedly support the theory that the giants were, in essence, hybrids, a remarkable blend of divinities and human beings. We eagerly await your insightful reflections and engaging discussions on this profound topic. Please feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below. If this journey through the captivating mysteries of the giants, as revealed in scripture and ancient mythological traditions, has both edified and enriched your understanding, I warmly invite you to express your support by liking and sharing this content. This way, more individuals can be reached by this profound reflection on themes that permeate both faith and sacred history. And, of course, please continue to follow us. The next video in our compelling series, which you can check out at the end of this video, is absolutely packed with information and theories that will undoubtedly surprise you. Thank you for joining us on this remarkable journey so far, and I eagerly look forward to seeing you soon.